Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Perillo,
I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
and we are at episode 83, and we are calling this one Judgment Day.
Da-da-da. I'm actually, I think, the only one in this conversation that has that word tattooed on their body, judgment. And there's some kind of confusion with it because, as you know, or maybe not, there are two ways to spell judgment.
Which way do you spell it? With the E in the middle or not?
Well, that's sad. I have to look. um, with the E in the middle. Yes.
Okay. So just so you know, because I looked it up when I was writing this, it is either way is correct.
Yes.
One is a little more American, one is a little more British. I think the
Which is
more
which?
British one has the E.
Yes. I went for traditional.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we are talking about Judgment Day, and it is up to your judgment as to whether you use the middle E or not. But
Yeah.
what we wanted to talk about today is the notion of judgment. I feel like there is a very strong cultural message against judgment, that it is bad to judge another person. It is unkind. It is not progressive. It is, not spiritual. There's like all this judgment about judgment. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about. So, just to start out with, do you think judgment is bad?
No, no, no. I'm a New Yorker. I spend the grand. I remember at one point my kid said something to me about that's my role. I'm a semiotician. I apply meaning to everything. I'm judging every single. Now there's a pejorative sense where you're. Well, what the assumption is what you're saying is I'm unfairly judging somebody, but it's rare that I remember getting to a screaming argument with an ex, and she goes, "Well, she just said something really asinine, and this is an ex that you know." And she said, "Well, that's just my opinion." I go, "Opinions can be wrong." I could be of the opinion that oxygen is fire. It's not. So no, I'm perfectly happy and comfortable in my judginess, and it works both ways. If you see me coming and based on something other than maybe the color of my skin, tone, timbre, cut of my jib, choose you don't like me, I can understand that completely. I'm sure I'm giving off signs, nature's warning signs. They're to be used. They're there for a reason. I'm okay with judgment.
Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to talk about is where is it appropriate? Where are kind of the risky
Yeah.
areas? Is it different at work or at home, personally? And the things that I think are important about judgment, I think there's a couple of things. So one is I believe that there is right and there is wrong.
Yeah.
And there's circumstances where there's gray areas, but generally there's a right and there's a wrong. And I think it's useful to name it. And so
Yeah, it is.
judgment to me also it has an ethical framework, right? So if I am judging whether or not a kind of behavior is ethical, wait, why are you laughing?
Because I once said to a friend, he had some extra painkillers left over from surgery. I'll give them to me. He goes, "What do you need them for?" I go, "I'm a 47-year-old MMA fighter. That's what I need them for." He goes, "No." I go, "Well, you have an ethical problem with this?" He goes, "Yes." I go, "Funny. I don't have any friends with ethics." And I didn't talk to him for like a year after that. I was so irked. I'm not going to get addicted to 4 tablets. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
But I would also say, I'm sorry, I have lots of ethics.
Okay. You have
So
lots of ethical friends? Oh,
I
you have lots of
do,
ethics.
I have both.
If you had 4 tablets and I asked you for them, would you give them to me?
So, that's a
Answer
good question.
carefully.
That's a good question.
I've
I
never had a
don't
problem with addiction. Ever,
No,
ever.
no, I know, and I'm
I know.
aware of that, and I
Yeah.
think if it was a question of, like, giving them to you or throwing them in the trash, I
Yes.
would probably give them to you because you don't have a problem with addiction, and
Yeah.
otherwise they just go in the trash, and I do have a problem with addiction, so I don't want them in my house.
Yes, correct. So yeah, I wouldn't offer them to you for precisely that's good ethical behavior. Just
Right.
saying no because I might possibly that's not good ethical behavior. That's just kind of granny stating. I don't know, but
So
whatever.
you're judging his judgment.
I'm judging his judgment, but we are still friends, so it's fine. It's fine.
Well,
I got over.
but I think that the idea, because one of the things that's frustrating to me is I feel like the concern people have about not appearing to be judgmental will
Mhm.
cause them to over-index on excuses.
Correct.
Well, she had a tough childhood. He, didn't realize that there would be repercussions down the road and that, some things are just wrong. right? They're
Yeah.
just wrong. And
Yeah.
I don't think we need to continue to have discussions about them. I think we get to make decisions about who we want to interact with based on our judgment of their choices, because that's where I really feel like the judgment comes in is how do I want to interact with another person and what boundaries do I want to set around another person,
Mhm, mhm.
right?
Yeah, there's a guy, his name is AC. I did an article on him, and he used to have this thing called Crime Faces, which is amazingly funny. He ended up being kind of one of Bill Burr's favorite online comedians for a period of time. And I guess he ran the copyright issues. He would take fights online, and he would commentate them like they were sporting events. And he did this one about he found some video of a guy in Thailand who was running down the street, shoeless, shirtless, and does a flying drop kick on some guy, and he sets a you know, you try to give him some space. You held him at the end of a long spoon. He says he's all right now. He's a married man. He's got a kid at home. And he goes, by the end of the evening, the same thing happened. The guy is wrecked on Fireball, kicking down people. And it was a very funny piece. But I was like, yeah, there's a certain point at which nature has judgment built into its process so that you can avoid things like that when you're 40. You're not babysitting a drunken friend, or you're not saying, well, I guess it's okay for them to drive. You don't do that shit after a certain age. You just stop because judgment serves you well, and in a professional sense as well. I mean, people kept saying, why did you work at Ozzy for so long? I said, well, it's hard to get another job. And did I know something was wrong? Yeah, I knew something was wrong, but my judgment was fully engaged. I was not blind about anything that was happening except for the particulars of the criminal behavior, but I knew it was a messed up place from the beginning. So judgment helps.
Well, and talking about work judgment, I mean, we both worked for Ozzy, we both worked for Carlos, me for a much shorter period of time. But I think
Uh,
what's interesting is
convicted
that
convicted felon, Carlos Watson. Yes.
convicted felon Carlos Watson. But I think, if you or I were to hear of someone that we knew who
Mhm.
was investing in Carlos now, if Carlos was starting a new enterprise and they said,
She
"Hey,
has.
I think this is great. I'm going to put money or time or effort, or I'm going to go to work there." We would judge swiftly and summarily. And
Yeah,
if that person came to us for advice, would probably give them an advice to go in the other direction.
correct.
Right. And I think that the judgment part of it is also, it's part of that, the maturity of recognizing people generally are who they are going to be by the time they're adults, right? Very few people change. And you can look to past behavior to indicate future actions.
That this is where you cut to the philosophical underpinnings of judgment that really is like the sine qua non. This is the really important thing. How does your judgment sit with forgiveness? I mean, because the common perception is that by judging person, you are removing them from the shadow of possible forgiveness. And I think that's sometimes okay. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I think it's complex. So I
Yeah.
think there's a couple of pieces to that. It's what does forgiveness mean?
Hmm.
Right? So forgiveness, and forgiveness means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So let's use the example of, we've talked about addiction a couple of different times. So let's use the example of someone who is a recovering addict and relapses,
Right.
right? I can see that person as someone who is ill. I can have compassion for them. I can forgive them for unskillful choices that they make in the grips of addiction. So, in a sense, I have forgiven them. I have
Hmm.
compassion for them. I am exercising spiritual principles in my engagement with them, but there's no way that my grandkids are getting in a car that they're driving.
Would you go to work for convicted felon Carlos Watson again?
No.
Mm. Okay. All right.
And
So yeah. Okay.
and again, I think the question is, what is forgiveness? For me, forgiveness is letting go of my emotional attachment
Got it.
to wrongs done me by another person,
Yeah. Got it.
right?
Got it.
It's
I'll accept
it's
that.
not, and I think you can do that. You can forgive somebody and still acknowledge fully who they are. I mean, there are people who have wronged me significantly,
Yeah.
who I have forgiven. I can even sometimes exercise some compassion for, but they will never darken my doorstep again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'm wondering if I've been that intractable about any. Yeah, but sometimes, in rare occasions, I've been like, "You have crossed a line that there's no coming back from this, so there's no point." So, yep.
I, I've been reading a lot of, work by Claire Keegan, and she's an Irish writer, mostly short stories, some novellas, just amazing, amazing, and I read this story, um, in her short story collection. I think it's called Dark Horses, and it is the story of a man reminiscing a relationship,
Mhm,
and he's in Ireland, rural Ireland, and he is getting drunk in the day,
mhm,
and he's missing a woman that he loved, and a
mhm,
friend sitting next to him at the bar says, "Whatever happened?" And this woman, and he said, I came home and I threatened to let her horses out onto the road."
mhm,
And his friend says, "Had you had a wee drop?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd had a wee drop." And he takes her beloved horses, open up drunk, opens up the gates and drives the horses onto the road, of course, putting them in great danger. And there's this
Oh, he
really
actually does this.
he does this. He d
Okay.
and there's this really haunting line where he says to his friend, "She gave me a second chance, but there was no coming back from that."
Mhm,
And I mean, her work is beautiful, and you don't know until the end of the story why she left him. You just know that he's devastated by it. But
okay.
this idea of like, she gave me a second chance, but we both knew there was no coming back from it. I do think there are moments in a
Mhm,
relationship, whether it's a work relationship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship, where you can't come back. And
yep.
even if you give that person a second chance,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you can't. And so I
Yeah, yeah.
think the idea of judging where you are
Well,
in that for what
sorry, you can't if you're expecting anything other than a similar outcome.
exactly, exactly.
If you expect the same outcome, go ahead, it's like
Right.
I'm writing a piece now and I quote, it was such a German quote where the woman, if you remember, climbed into the polar bear enclosure in the Berlin Zoo and was attacked. I don't think she was killed. I think they rescued her in time, and they go to a German official who said in a very German way, said, "Well, we have noticed in the past that when you jump in the polar bear enclosure, this tends to happen." That was it. That was it. It tends to. I mean, yeah. If you go back in expecting the exact same thing, well, okay, you'll be fine. So,
Right. And so I think that I mean, one of the concerns that I have is that this sort of, the cultural narratives around judgment, and I think in particular, like, the spiritual narratives. Like, I wrote a Substack called where I talked about spiritual gaslighting. The ways in
I like that.
which
Yeah,
yeah, thanks. The way that which, and I mean use spirituality writ
yeah,
large, right? It's not necessarily
yeah, yeah,
religion. It
yeah,
could
yeah,
be a
yeah.
mindfulness practice that you're
Yep.
doing something wrong in judging. And I think that really damages people. Like, I do not watch the show Couples Therapy, but I get served up clips about it all the time on
Mhm,
social media.
mhm,
And
mhm.
couples therapy is, I guess, it's marriage therapy or couples therapy where you go in and you agree to air your journey living in public, and then they put clips on it. And
Yeah.
often it is one partner, usually the man, who is behaving very badly.
Mhm,
And what's interesting is that it seems to be like somebody made a comment on social media that the show is just all about how women put up with horrible shit, basically.
mhm. Yep.
Sorry, I have to cough for a second. Um,
Okay.
and And that's one of the things that I think about is that by saying there's something wrong with judging another person, what we are also saying is don't get angry, don't push back in power dynamics. And I do
Mhm.
think, men can be in a horrible relationship with women. There's no question there are terrible women in the world who treat their male partners or male family members horribly. But I do think there is a cultural understanding that women in opposite sex relationships are supposed to do a lot of enduring. They're supposed to
Yeah,
not be
yeah,
judgmental and forgive and give. I don't know. Do you think that's
yeah.
true?
No, I don't. I don't really, and I mean because when you say not this whole nobody likes to be judged, that's why this anti-judging thing has caught some purchase. But the reality of it is, you may not like it, but you should expect it. You know, there was somebody who I knew whose marital fidelity hinged on that one plate too many. There's like one plate too, like, empty nesters, kids gone from the house, talked to the husband several times about, hey, could you, get the plate from the table? Don't put it on top of the counter. Put it in the dishwasher. I don't need to see a sink full of dishes. Yeah, listen. And he was pretty good for a while. And then one day came down, and for like 3 days in a row, there was just one plate on the counter right over the dishwasher. And that's when she made a decision to have an affair. Because clearly you were trying to bring me her attitude. I think she actually said it, trying to bring me to heel using a fucking plate. Fuck you. I'm judging and you will pay for this judgment. So I don't think that, and I've had situations where I've been in and it's clear as a bell or unmuddied lake, to borrow from a Clockwork Orange, when it's over, because it's not, I'm not out to subject you to the tyranny of my expectations, but I'm not a fool, and I'm not going to stick around through substandard behavior. And if women are being sold that narrative, as far as I'm concerned, that's some Connie Francis 1950s shit. I advise all my daughters, get out. Statistically
Right.
speaking, this can't be the best. So sorry, go.
Well, and even if it is the best, right? Like, even if, I mean, I would say to friends, if your choice is miserable and partnered or sane and single, go for
Mhm.
single every time.
Yeah, yeah, you get more stuff done, and your misery quotient is lower.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about where, I mean, oh, and one more thing too about judgment is one of the things that I think is useful to look at, particularly in a work context, but in any context, is do the people around you have good judgment?
That ties into our fire related. So good,
Right.
perfect.
And
Yep.
so do the people around you have good judgment is a question of like Dan Savage, who I love his
Mhm.
podcast, Savage Love, talks and gives relationship advice. And he says you want to see good judgment in the people that you are dating or considering dating. Like
Part
some
of
straight
trust.
guy who starts sending a woman who he's just exchanged messages with unsolicited dick pics has bad judgment.
Yeah,
Right?
well, yeah, that depends.
Well, most straight women are not interested in that as the second, "Hey, here's a picture," right? And
Well,
so I think
what I'm saying is, if you've been asked to do so, I
yes,
think it's
unsolicited being the key point, but
right.
the
Correct. Right. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
that
Yes.
we are always looking for, as we are assessing any kind of relationship, demonstrations of good judgment,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I think that's important, also in terms of work. If you're going through an interview process and it takes 16 rounds, you've talked to 20 people and they've asked you
Fine.
to do work for free,
Yes.
they're demonstrating many things, but also bad judgment, right?
I went through 9 at Facebook, and I think it got to 16 before they finally figured out, "I think you're too senior for this job." It's like, "You guys couldn't have figured that out 15 fucking interviews ago?
Right.
Unbelievable."
Right.
Yeah.
So assessing for other people's good judgment and being mindful of if they show bad judgment, like you don't need that. Like that is a disqualifying event. Do you want to? I mean, I've got some other.
Hold on.
What?
Do you
What?
think that bad judgment is contagious in a professional setting? Like a snowball, like the boss makes one, and then you make one, and then it just becomes the culture. Bad judgment becomes a culture.
I don't think that the problem to solve there is bad judgment. I think the problem to solve is that people are not listening to
Yeah.
dissension.
Yeah. Yep.
So usually I have seen many, many, many circumstances where there is a bad judgment by someone in leadership. And depending on the culture, they are either not challenged at all because they're never going to change. It risks, retaliation. There's a lot
Mhm.
of reasons why people won't challenge a leader's bad judgment or bad decisions. And the leader may be a bully, they may know that they're going to get retaliation, or they just might not be listened to. Like it takes a
Right.
certain amount of energy to say to a leader, I think this is going to be a problem. You're
Yeah.
risking social capital. And so I
Yes.
think when a leader makes a bad decision, that bad decision snowballs and cascades, not because everyone else was removed, like didn't got their
Mm.
judgment snatched out of their head, but because they have been taught that speaking back, telling the truth, pointing out flaws is never going to work out well for them. So they just won't say it. So the bad judgment is unopposed for cultural reasons.
Yeah.
It doesn't spread.
Here we go. Politics in America. Good for you to cap that.
What's your let's see your fire me now. What's your fire me for
The fire me
judgment?
is this woman has a slightly problematical boss, and she is kind of covered for him. And I mean, she's been a good employee, right? Not complaining, but the boss came in and asked something unreasonable. She felt, given how helpful and generally supportive she's been, and as now is the law of the land in many places where you're still forced to go to the office, she's texting with a coworker. Comes and says, "Oh, I can't believe he's asking me to do this thing." It's like, oh, it's true. I covered for him before. I did this other thing. Well, unbeknownst to her, for some reason, the person that she assumed was a workplace friend decided to play this for advantage and presumably said, "Oh, I accidentally, sorry, forwarded your text to the boss." And so now she's got a Monday morning meeting coming up where she has to face the boss over. She didn't use anything pejorative, didn't use any, he's not a dumb son of a bitch, none of that. Just said that she thought that the workplace situation was uncomfortable, unfair, but she's been outed by a person that she assumed. She goes, I'm frozen with fear. I don't know how to, am I going to lose? What's happening here? And what should I do? And so I thought that's an interesting. Well, I mean, for me, it's easy. You never trust anybody you work with, so that's easy. How would you make that mistake? But I'm not out to punish the victim here. I was trying to think, well, what would you do in this situation?
I mean, I would go for brazen. I would brazen it out
Yep.
and say, um, I would just say, you know, do you want to talk about the concerns that I raised in the email? I mean, in the text
Nice.
exchange?
Nice. Nice.
Because
Yep.
it sounds like they're valid concerns. And so
Yes.
this is one where I think if you walk in and you decide what's the conversation I want to have right now, and if the
Hmm.
conversation if I were talking to this woman right now, I'd be like, the conversation you want to have is why
Hmm.
is your boss doing the unskillful thing that he did?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's the
It's not about
question.
me protecting. It's not me protecting you. It's not me protecting me. It's me protecting the financial health of this company.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that like, and then, if your boss wants to get into like, well, you were texting this person or you were doing whatever, to say, I certainly know now not to text with this
Yes.
individual again.
Yes. Yep.
Like, it's like, clearly I'm
Yep.
never texting this person again. And then to
Yep.
maybe even admit, like, you're right. I should probably have come to you directly with this
Yep.
concern, which is why I'm glad that we can discuss this now, because it would be great if we could come up with new ways of interacting so that this doesn't happen
Yep.
again.
That's why you deserve the big money. There you go. That's perfect. That's fucking perfect. That's great.
That's
All
why
right.
I'm the executive coach. But I
Yeah.
think what's important is to recognize, it's we're all I always talk about narratives. We're always doing dueling narratives.
Yep.
Right? And so the narrative that this boss may come in, and what she's concerned about is the boss is going to come in and be like, you
Fire
were,
her.
texting trash about me
Yeah.
to, a coworker.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's useful if he does come down hard on that to try to be like, can we involve HR?
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
then, I was expressing some frustration. I would use minimizing words like venting,
Yep.
blowing off steam,
Yep.
some emotions that I had. I
Yep.
was not talking about anything confidential.
Yep.
I probably would have been more skillful if I could have addressed these with you directly, but hopefully we can today talk about ways in which I think we could work together more skillfully. But
Hmm.
I didn't do anything
Yep.
unethical.
Yep. Yeah. And I would actually like to try to see somebody write a pip off of that.
Right.
What are you going to
And
say?
and the
Yeah.
reality is, I mean, I don't see how she can get fired for this.
Yeah.
Like, it would be like, how is that different than the boss walking in on a conversation that she's having and overhearing her say,
Yeah.
"I can't believe he asked me to do this thing again."
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
You
Right. Right.
know? So,
Yes.
but so that's a good, I like that, fire me.
Yep.
So
Yep.
let's
Yep.
just go ahead and finish up with where, because there are examples where judgment is a problem, right? So let's just
Mhm.
talk about where that is. And we've kind of already talked about this, but I think that it's, if you are trying to use your judgment as a way to control or manipulate others,
Mhm.
that's bad,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So, for example, the
Everybody
judge,
says.
say again?
Everybody says. You
Right.
know.
Well, or if you think about it, like one of the things I talk about, a lot of my friends are grandparents. And
Mhm.
so we talk about the third rail of parenting adult children, which
Mhm.
is keep your opinions about child rearing to yourself,
Yep.
right? Like kids kids are raised differently than when, our certainly our oldest were like being raised, right? So
Yep.
like potty training in the early 90s was a different deal than potty training in the 2025, 2026
Yep.
era. They read different
Yep.
books, they have different resources. You know what? It doesn't matter. The kids are going to end up using the toilet, right?
Yes.
And so I think that there's a lot of ways in which parents of adult children will try to control or manipulate
Mhm.
their the child rearing of their, said grandchildren in ways that are not helpful, that are based in judgment, that really don't
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm.
Like what difference does it make if a 3-year-old little boy runs around in a dress because his
Yep.
sister has a dress?
Yep.
And that parents may have issues with that. They may have feelings about it. They need to just keep their mouths shut. So I think
Mhm.
the idea of like always having an assessment of like how important is this, right?
Mhm.
Like if a parent is going to tell their grown child something about how to raise their kids, it needs to be either A, invited, or B, like life threatening.
Yeah, correct. Otherwise, you can draw from the Big Lebowski. Second time he's come over the show, or just say, "Hey, that's your opinion, man. You
Right.
don't like dresses. It's your opinion. Good. I'm glad you have it. We're fine with dresses on boys here. So yeah.
Right. And it doesn't matter. And then I think also, one of the things is people who are making a judgment based on authority they don't have,
Mhm.
or knowledge they don't have. So I had someone interact with me in an unskillful way, and he was mansplaining artificial intelligence to me. And it's like I
Did
also
you?
had
I'm
some.
sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. Did you read the sad wives of the AI in the New Yorker?
No, no, I'll have to look
Oh,
that up.
oh my God, you got it. Before next show, please try to
Okay,
read it.
okay, maybe that's something we can talk about on the next show. But and even a different example is somebody, not in a work context, was explaining team dynamics and organizational development to me. And I really was like, with a lot of judgment, like that I wasn't getting it. And I wanted to be like,
Oh
bitch,
man.
please, I have a master's degree in this. I have been doing this for a dozen years. People
No,
pay
no,
me
no, no,
coin.
no. What you should have done is just got the exact opposite way. Really? And what happens then? She,
Well, no, because this was such a judgment laden missive,
yeah.
that it was actually, for me, it was relationship ending. I was like,
Yep.
and I'm done, and I'm done. And so I think the idea is like, if your judgment is based on something you know very little of, either you have no personal experience, no lived experience, no educational experience, then, and the person to whom you are speaking, the one you are judging, has the degree, the experience, the lived experience, then you need to just shut the fuck up.
I had a delightful thing. I called, I've learned a few things from the convicted felon Carlos Watson, and one of the things he did really well was he just talked to people that he was into. If they had, he didn't have, it was not an ask. It was just, I'd like to spend a few minutes to pick your brain. And so I called this lady at a record label in LA, of course, pursuant to maybe signing one of the bands I'm in. But I want to talk to you about music. And we talked about music, and she spent 20 minutes of a conversation lecturing me on the value of social media. All right. I've been doing music since 1980, and I worked in Silicon Valley since 1985. And I just listened patiently, and it was with great satisfaction and delight that within 6 months of this conversation, she got me too'd out of the industry.
Oh,
Her, fe-
wow.
her female artist on her record label, turned their backs on her, left the company, left her high and dry. She had to leave the company to save the company. And I was like, sometimes the right things happen to the right people. So I never complained at the time. I just took it on the chin and thank you for your input and spending the time. And that was the end of that. But it was really delightful to see on the other side.
Yes, and I hope that karma circles around to this particular individual that I am talking about as well. So, all right, well,
Yeah.
that's what we have time for today. If you have comments, suggestions, ideas for stories, or something you want us to talk about on Fire Me, WTF at badbossbrief.com, WTF at badbossbrief.com. I promise I read every single one and respond to anyone who isn't trying to sell us something. All right, that's it. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Adios. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief with Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Payrollo. You can find Stephanie on Substack at spayrollo.substack.com. And you can find Eugene on Substack at eugenesrobinson.substack.com, as well as over on Instagram at Mr. Sleep 3. That's the number 3. If you've got a workplace question, situation, or story you'd like us to discuss, send it to me, Stephanie, at WTF@badbossbrief.com. Be sure to join us every other Wednesday at badbossbrief.substack.com for new episodes. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work. Thanks for listening.